Hello and welcome to another episode of Who Knew in the Moment, the podcast. I'm your host, Phil Friedrich, and today I'm honored to have Samantha Pregenzer with me. She is a professional and owns a business called Simply Organized, and within her business she helps people and businesses organize their homes and different spaces that they want to take back over. And with our story today, what I think you're going to hear is how when you find something that is important to you, you can then cultivate a business, but it's not without difficulty. So Samantha, thanks so much for being on today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So to start your journey, growing up, your mom liked to host different events and entertaining at the house, which inevitably probably meant she asked you to maybe clean up a little bit. So talk a little bit about the early days and growing up with that.
Yeah, well, to be honest with you, early days I was not very organized. As a young child, I had a messy room. I just loved being with friends and being outside, and it was just such a different time where we could be gone all day, but we'd have to be home by dusk. So my spaces were generally never clean and organized, but that just spoke to being out there living life and being a child. And yes, my mom did host many events, and she's always been that kind of caretaker. She also owned and operated a daycare center for many years, and so she just loved to help families and children and host events. And so I definitely picked up some of that, I guess we could say a little bit of Martha Stewart-esque from her. And my grandfather owned a hardware store, and so he was a heavy influence on kind of that interest that I took in DIY and kind of fixing things. And I always sort of had a knack for fixing things. I mean, that's one thing that my parents definitely tasked me with. Like whenever something new came into the house that needed to be assembled, they handed it off to me, and including the fish tank. So, fish tanks are very specific. Like, in order to keep the fish alive, the water has to be perfect. And that was something that just innately kind of came easy to me. So, looking back at my childhood, there's definitely some of those things that I look back and I think, that it makes sense that I'm doing what I'm doing now.
Yes. Now, with your grandfather, owning his hardware store, were there different, times that you spent at the hardware store? Was it more just that when you were around him, he was fixing things and you were kind of picking up on knowledge, or how'd that come to be?
Yeah, so I grew up in San Francisco, and his hardware store is in Tucson, Arizona. So I was not able to be there all the time, just a couple times during the year. And I just think his personality, he had a very calm demeanor, a deep thinker, patient. And I picked up a lot of that from him. This job takes a lot of patience, and it takes moments of thinking and kind of just being quiet. So I definitely picked up a lot of those traits from him.
I love it. Now, as we all grow up and we leave the house, we then have to completely own the cleanliness of our lives. And so when you got to college, that was something you started to notice, like, all right, I'm living on my own. If I want it to look a certain way, it can, but it also comes down to me making it that way. So talk a little bit about that phase of life and being out on your own and starting to get intrigued by this.
Yeah, definitely. So, as we move out on our own, we tend to take better care of our things because we're the ones purchasing them and we're the ones taking care of them, and we're not living at home anymore. But I think what was another challenge for me is growing up in the Bay Area and going to college here as well. Our spaces here are very small, and so you really have to make the most of your space. And so I would find that I would have all these unique ideas for how to get my room, because I would be living in roommate situations where we would be sharing an apartment or a townhouse. I'd find some very unique ways to create additional space for my things, and then I was pretty ruthless about going through my things and decluttering, and but again, forced to a little bit because of the amount of space that I had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now on that topic, and we're jumping ahead to your expertise, but I think it's a great time to talk through it. I feel like something, or one of the main reasons people don't declutter or are maybe not good at decluttering is the sentimental value of holding on to something, even though you go, you haven't worn that shirt in 8 years, and realistically, are you ever going to wear it? So, as you now are working with people and talking through decluttering, getting rid of things, what is either something you help them with, or what are some of the most frequent reasons that you hear from people of why they have not gotten rid of said item?
Oh, I mean, I can't say I've heard it all because we're always hearing something new. We're
Yeah.
always getting something new, kind of like, oh, that's interesting. Um, People have lots of reasons to keep things.
Yeah.
It could just be, this is something that I wore in college to bed every night. It has meaning to me, or this is a shirt from a family member, or this is I went to this concert with this person and I'm keeping this thing, or things that, parents or grandparents have passed down to them.
Yeah.
It may not be clothing, it may be an item,
Yep.
and they're worried about letting it go. What if that person comes over and they are looking to see where it is, or
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
yeah, so we see and hear lots of different reasons for keeping. But when somebody reaches out to a professional organizer like me,
Yeah.
in general they are ready to let something go. So we are never really pushing them.
Yeah.
We don't have to push them to get rid of anything necessarily that's sentimental, because other things are going to leave and it'll free up more space. So they're already motivated.
Yep.
And so most of the time our families are keeping things that are sentimental to them, and we aren't really encouraging them to let it go.
Understood.
Yeah.
Now, if only in college that would have been the launching pad of the business. You were studying more in the counseling side of things, though, and so naturally that was the original route. So talk a little bit about finishing up school and then the early years of a career for you.
Sure. So the undergrad program that I was in was actually supposed to then move into a master's program. It was connected at the same college. And my plan originally was I wanted to be a marriage and family therapist. So that was the route that I was on.
Yeah.
And the degree that I have is counseling with an emphasis on nonprofit. And so, I got through that program, and I always had that calling. Like, I just felt like I really wanted to be a professional organizer, but I didn't know how to do that.
Yeah.
And knowing how much work, time, hours were going to go into getting my MFT, and then 3,000 hours of hands-on work that you have to do before you can, sit for the test and everything. It just seemed like, am I really going to put all my time and energy and money into this profession if really what I want to do is I want to be a professional organizer? So
Yeah.
to the point of your podcast, I'm so glad I made this decision. I ended up moving down to Southern California, and I started working for a nonprofit organization down there, which had so many elements of organization, project management, helping people and families, and that really is what I'm doing now in this profession. So
Yeah.
being there in that job for 4 years really solidified. And by the way, many people at this organization, they were licensed, they were LCSWs, they were social workers. And so I was able to spend a lot of time with them and really realize I made the right decision by not going through with being an MFT. I really didn't feel like that was the kind of life that I wanted.
Yeah.
So I worked at the nonprofit for 4 years and helped families. We worked with low income and homeless families, and I was the one who, when I ended up leaving, I started out as their intake coordinator and then grew within the organization, and I left, I think I was technically called their project director or something like that. I forget what the title was, but basically I was able to help create programs for all the families and all the needs that we were seeing come in the door. And that was such a fulfilling job to see
Yeah.
the need and go out and get a grant I would work with the grant writer, we would write the grant, get the money, and then the program would come to fruition. It was amazing. So there was a lot of organization elements to that job, as well as helping people and solving problems.
Yeah.
And it was very meaningful work, but it was very, very hard. It was a lot of hours, not a lot of pay, which was fine. I was happy to do it, and I absolutely loved that organization. And then, I got married and started having children, and so I stepped away from that job for a period of time, and ultimately still knew I was, a stay-at-home mom, and still knew that I wanted to be a professional organizer, and at some point I was going to try to figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
How to make that happen.
So, within that, I think so often, people have had the dream or a goal of doing something, right? Mm-hmm. And whether it's lack of time, lack of how the heck do I even do that? How does this become a job? There's always that reason why not. But then there's also that like deep, either in your heart, in your head, like, but I want to. So talk a little bit about that for you, deciding to take a step in that direction and, start blogging and creating, the business, even maybe before you knew it was going to become a business.
Right. Well, having young children is, you learn so much, and they phase through so much, sizing and interests in toys, and then you add another one to the mix, and they have different interests, and so the phases for parents, it can be very overwhelming. Yep. And so I was always looking to try to find ways to streamline our home, create better storage, help us move through whatever toys they were playing with, and like, okay, here are all the things that, because my boys were born somewhat close together, they're about 22 months apart, and so, but they still had very different interests. Yeah. But we had a lot of volume, we had a lot of stuff because they liked so many different things. So figuring out how to store their toys and make it accessible for them, I was really kind of in the trenches, like testing out different ideas, and I started sharing them. I started sharing my ideas and DIY ideas for other, like home improvements and things like that, with friends on an online platform that we were on together. And one of my friends, Kelly, I will always say her name whenever I share this story, she encouraged me to start a blog. Yeah. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, this is back in, well, when she started encouraging me, that would have been in like 2008 or 9.
Yeah.
And I didn't start the blog until 2010. But yeah, so I said, okay, well, let's give it a shot. And then it just kind of started evolving from there. While having young kids at home, living in the moment, and also trying to figure out how am I going to start this blog. Blogging back then was very different. It's not as easy. Like, it's now you can just plug and play and have something set up within a matter of hours and start blogging. But back then we were on Blogspot.
Yeah. Which
was our original platform. And I had to do all the coding, all the setup, all the framework of how the interface looked. And I didn't know the first thing about that. But I was so passionate about the idea of possibly helping other moms that were going through the same things that I was going through with, all the stuff and having kids and how to make it easier.
Yeah. So with that, and I love, well, two things I love. One, I was encouraged in 2008. I didn't do it until 2010. So there's never a right time, but eventually you're just like, all right, I got to jump in. But then two, being willing to take a step into something that you really, you know about a part of it, but you don't know a lot of it, right? You knew the part about, well, I want to write this. I just don't know all the other technical parts that I need to know to actually get it out into the masses. So talk a little about, being willing to take that step, even if it's been delayed, right? Someone listening right now is like, I'm Sam. Yeah, I had a friend tell me to do this a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, and I just haven't done it, but I still feel like I want to do it. encouragement to take that first step?
Yeah, I mean, it was, I don't know. It was, I had really have to dig to answer that. I was just so, first of all, Kelly suggesting that to me, it was such a compliment.
Yeah.
Because she was seeing me share all these things, and she's like, we've got to get this out to the masses. Like, we've got to do more. And it took a lot of nap times and a lot of late nights after my kids were in bed to really dig in and figure out how I was going to build this and teach myself essentially how to build the framework of a blog, get it going, and then how to market it. Because back then we had Facebook, which we started the Facebook page pretty quickly after the blog got started, but we really didn't have Instagram, and Pinterest came along after my blog started. So, getting it out and communicating, it was mostly, I was kind of internal within the blogging world, because the blogging world was so different back then, and we were promoting each other's work on each other's blogs, and that was kind of how word was getting out, and then you would get hits on your blog. And over time, we just learned from each other. Everybody, like, I would follow bloggers who helped with the tech background of your blog, and so I would go and follow them and read their stuff. Oh, I can do that on my blog, and then I'd go back and kind of overnight work on some stuff. And then, in addition to that, learning how to take photos was a huge part of blogging, because you have to show your work, and there wasn't really video that you can embed into your blog back then. It's just looking back 15 years ago, it was so different. It was so different, but I was so determined to just keep on the mission of, back then it was just simply wanting to share projects and helping people along the way, sharing things that were going on, projects I was doing, phases that my kids were in, some lifestyle stuff, some personal stuff. And even then, I still did not think I would be where I am today based off of that. Like, I went into the blog thinking, oh, this is fun, and this is like an outlet and something I can do when my kids are napping and in bed at night, and it was something that I felt, I was giving information and I was helping people, but I didn't think I would eventually have the business that I have now.
So let's talk.
Project that out.
So let's talk about that, because I think, for so many people, the question is always, how do I take a hobby or, something I enjoy and create a business out of it? And we'll talk about scaling a business and all that, but just talk about that, first initial phase of going from, hey, I'm really just doing this to help other people, to, wow, I could actually make a business out of this. And whether you envision it as, hey, it could be a full-time job, or, hey, it could just be some additional income to, help the family, or, take a trip, however you viewed it. Talk a little bit about that pivot for you from going from hobby to actually making it a business.
So the hobby to business, so when we moved back to the San Francisco Bay Area in 2013, so the blog had started in 2010, and between 2010 and 2013, brands were reaching out. We were getting a lot of interest in, oh, we're going to send you a product. You can do whatever you want with it and share it on your blog, and so sponsored content, branded brand partnerships, stuff like that. So that already in and of itself felt amazing, that I was getting the projects I was doing, the work I was putting out was being recognized, and brands were reaching out, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. Even Martha Stewart reached out, and we did a brand partnership with them. She had an office line at the time, office supplies, and I did this whole thing, and it was amazing. I couldn't believe it, because I love her. So anyway, when I moved back in 2013, there was a local moms club in the Lafayette area of the Bay Area, and one of them recognized where I was living, and they recognized I was somewhere in the vicinity, and they reached out and said, I think you're in my area now, would you be interested in helping me? This person had been reading the blog that whole time. I didn't know that. And so she was my very first project. She reached out and said, I think you can help me. And I said, okay, I don't know if I can help you, but I'll
Yeah.
try. I mean, I was like, this, ultimately, it was something I wanted to do. And so it started with one person who had been reading that blog. And by then I had started the Instagram account. They had been following on Instagram, and then she recognized where I lived and she reached out. And that's essentially how it went from hobby to business, because she was really my first, outside of my own home, she was
Yeah.
my first client project where I was doing organizing and DIY in her home.
Yes.
And yeah, that's how it transitioned, simply from somebody following and reaching out.
I love it. Now, from that standpoint, I think scaling for people can be a nerve-wracking thing, right? You go from, hey, I was kind of doing this just out of fun and some brand partnerships, and that was even great. And then all of a sudden it's, well, if I'm going to do this for one person, then maybe, for different expenses or things that I need to be doing, maybe I should do it for 10 or 20 people. And then
Right.
do I hire people, right? And all right, well, now if I hire someone, there's additional costs that come with that, and there's a little extra stress, right? So talk a little bit about that phase of it for you with, scaling and then growing the business, and
Right.
we'll get to where it's at today, but just that initial part of growing.
Right. So for the first 5 years, I solely worked alone.
Wow.
So garages, like these big garage projects that you see me do now, that was only me. And looking back, I had to do that. That was, when you reached out to do this interview, I was like, those 5 years were really where it's really where the culture, the worldview that I have on organizing, everything came together during those 5 years, because I was in the trenches, like deep. Like
Yeah.
everything was word of mouth referral,
Yeah.
and it was amazing. Those are like the best referrals you can get. But I started with that one family, and that family turned into, well, I'm going to refer you to these people. And then it was just momentum from there.
Yeah.
And I learned so many lessons the hard way, but that's the only way to learn. And now where I'm at, not to jump ahead, but just for this one point, now when I'm training the people on the team, I can easily say, no, this is why we don't do it this way. We manage the project, we manage the scope, because many times when I was working alone, I would let the client lead
Yeah.
the project, and that's really not the way it should go. I mean, obviously we're there to serve them, we're there to help them get to the end goal, but they need to look to us as the expert to lay out the framework and lay out the scope of work and the client expectation and deliver on that. And so I had to go through 5 years of, really getting, what kicked out of me,
Yeah.
doing all the hard work. But now that I had to go through that to get to where I am. And looking back, people could say, because you hear this from people, you should hire and start delegating as soon as possible when you really start getting busy. I didn't hire my first employee until 2018. So that was 5 years of completely working by myself. And yeah, so I don't know that I would have started hiring sooner, because I feel like I kind of had to go through a bunch of stuff. And the other thing is, when you start going after your passion and it's a business, you then also have to start learning how to run a business.
Yes.
You have to learn not only the organizing piece and the client expectation and the marketing and all that, but you also have to work on all the internal parts, like invoicing and keeping your website up and running. And there's so much more. And now having 7 members on my team, being a leader and
Yep.
training, and there's so much more that goes into it. And so those 5 years, I really learned a lot.
Well, and one thing that you mentioned there, which I think is really important, is realizing that you are the expert in the space, and the client's looking to you. And I think one part that can be really difficult, two things that can be really difficult for the owner is one, feeling worthy of the price you're charging, right? Hey, this isn't a non-for-profit business. This is a for-profit business. Doesn't mean I have to, gouge you or ask for the top dollar, but, I have to make it fair and reasonable. And then I think second is, so many people want to be liked, and they view it as, well, if I don't do what a customer or a client wants, then, I'm going against what they desire. And it's like, sometimes people don't know what they don't know, right? Mm-hmm. And they need you to say, hey, actually, I tried this once, and here's how it's going to end up. So instead of spending 3 or 4 days trying to do it that way, how about we go here? And the person might say, I had never even thought of that, right? But oftentimes people just don't like the confrontation. So I guess talk about those two different elements. One, being recognizing that you are the expert and you can charge a price for that, but then two, being willing to have a conversation that maybe goes against the grain of what the client is wanting, but it's because you're an expert that you're bringing it up.
Right. Well, I think, again, going back to that just experience and putting in the reps, I have hundreds, if not already thousands, maybe in the 1,000 area projects that we've done. So I have the experience for sure, and I think that kind of speaks to it. The portfolio sort of speaks for itself at this point because we've done so many projects, we've built so many things, we've experienced lots of different spaces and family dynamics. So when clients come in now, they see that professionalism. They can go on the website, they can go on the social accounts and see this person has the look and feel that I like. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And a few years ago, I was already feeling like the business was going really well, but I sort of wanted to position myself as even more of an expert. So I spent a year studying to become certified. Yeah. And I think, I passed, and so I'm a certified professional organizer, which is amazing. I never thought I would have ever, that was a dream, but I didn't think that it would happen for much longer, but I'm so grateful that it did. I think that was back in 2021 is when I passed. And so having that level of, having those letters after my name now, I think that also speaks to the expertise.
Yeah.
And so I don't feel hesitant to charge what we charge now because I know the value that we bring. We never overcharge. The level of expertise, the efficiency that we bring. Our systems are so locked in tight. We've done this so many times. So if anybody ever asks, do you really need all 4 people on that garage project? It's like, yes, because everybody has a specific job to do, and that's why we can get your garage done in 6 hours. Because we've created a system that works. And so when you explain it, whatever the space is that we're talking to with a client who's considering working with us, this is why we need that many people there, and this is why it's going to take that long, then they understand. It's just kind of bringing them along for the journey and explaining all the pieces. And, there are times when we're not the right fit for that client, and that's okay too. I've had many people say it's out of our budget, or they want to be the 4th person on the project and not have me bring my 4th team member. And I'm like, no, that's not the way it works. It's not going to work well if you're the 4th team member. I don't want to direct you and tell you to sweep over here or go pick up that thing over there and move it. And, our job is to take the burden off their shoulders, and it's full service. And so there's many times that I've had to walk away from a project just because, they didn't want to work with us the way that we work well. And the reason that it's set up the way it is to take the burden off of your shoulders. This business was built, I'm a mom of 3. I know how stressful it is. And my ultimate goal is you have the most peaceful experience, and you can go to the grocery store, you can go pick up your kids from school, you can go take a nap, do whatever it is you want while we're doing the work. And that's why you hire us, is to provide that experience.
Yes.
So, over the years, I've learned who our ideal clients are and who they aren't, and that just takes time being in the business, and then building the confidence to say it's okay to walk away from this. You can't be everything to everybody.
Yep.
We have a very specific clientele and niche that we're in, and I have to stay true to that.
Yeah, I love that. Now, something that you've been doing simultaneously is growing the social media side of things, right? I mean, between Pinterest, Facebook, Instagram, your YouTube channel, right? There's all these different metrics where people have access to you. And I think that's probably a tough part of growing your business and getting to a spot where you're saying yes and no is you sit there and you rewind the clock. Gosh, if only in day one of 2013 I could have had hundreds of thousands of people that knew about my business just asking to work with me, how amazing that would have been, right? And in the early days, you kind of have to just say yes to about anybody because you need to get reps and you need to have experience. But now you have this massive social following, and there's probably more people than you can even serve with a team of 7 that reach out, but you have to really dive in. So talk a little about growing the social following for you and some of the things that you've done strategically to grow that.
Yeah, so I think being consistent and being yourself and showing the good, bad, and ugly, showing as much as we can, because obviously we're in somebody's home. We want to be respectful of that. Yeah. I think just showing up and whatever that looks like, people are drawn to that. They like to see things. The one thing that I love is sharing things that are relatable. I'm not showing you this Pinterest-worthy space all the time. I mean, the reality is everybody has these spaces around their house and they need attention. Garages are all, not beautiful.
Yeah.
And I like that I have the variety of projects that we're on where somebody can relate to having a space issue. They don't have a lot of space, and I know this might sound crazy, but even people who have a lot of space struggle because they don't know where do we go. Like, we had a client recently, they had so many closets, and even I was being challenged, all these years later. I was like, I don't know what should we put where, because the flow of the house was very interesting, and there were so many closets, and there was only 3 of them living in the house, and we still were kind of perplexed. So, I like that we can share things that are relatable on social.
Yeah. And
whenever I'm sharing, I'm trying to reach the people who could relate to that and kind of speak to it, and then just share. This is what this family. It's all about sharing stories, essentially, is what I'm doing. So here's this family, here's here's the situation, here's their space. This is what we did to solve it, and hopefully you find the people that can relate to that, and then they want to, stay on the journey with you and follow you, and and the thing about social, and I'm sure you've heard this, they're all so different.
Yeah.
Our community on Instagram is so different than the community on TikTok, which is so different than, the people who join the newsletter. And so figuring out who your community is really important, because if you aren't sharing the content that speaks to them, they're going to unfollow you. And so you have to understand who are the people, what is their age range, what is the dynamic, what are they looking for. The people on Pinterest, Pinterest really now is a search engine. It's not even social media. So that's where people are going. It's like the visual Google, if you will. Yeah. They're going and searching, it's amazing all the filters you can filter down to on Pinterest now. So I kind of look at each platform individually.
Yeah.
And, this year, I would say, I don't know that I'm necessarily looking for growing the numbers. This year I'm looking for sharing projects, sharing what's happening with my team, because I'm training them and many of them are becoming leads, and I want to share their stories and projects they're working on, and also just maybe working more on video content and trying to build more video on YouTube and kind of work on that community.
Yeah.
The algorithm and the different platforms are so unreliable sometimes. And so trying to figure out how we build our own platforms that people want to come to. You know, like our website is that's something that we own. We don't own the content that we put on Instagram and all these other platforms. So
I love it.
Looking at that this year.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and as you've grown that, I feel like, your social following and your reach has opened up doors. And I know there was kind of a collaboration or a pitch to Better Home and Garden. So talk about some of the neat, opportunities that have opened up just due to your reach and scale that you have today.
Yeah, so Better Homes and Gardens, I love working with them. I ended up, I'd have to go back and figure out what year it was. It was maybe 2015. They reached out and invited me to New York to go to their Style Maker conference.
Okay.
And so I went there, and when you're there, you have the opportunity to pitch some of the editors. And so I was able to sit down with one of the editors and kind of share, this is my blog. Obviously the business was still in infancy back then. And then one of the editors, when we all got home, reached out, and they have a couple organizing publications, and they asked if I'd be interested in being a field editor. Yeah. And that's how that came together. I just had an opportunity to go talk to their editorial people, and they, Brian Kramer, who's one of their top editors, he reached out to me and said, we've looked at your website, we think this is great. Like, the one thing, again, going back to being relatable, what I love about working with them is they really wanted to see relatable projects. Mm-hmm. And so they took it upon themselves. They would go to my blog, or they would go to the Instagram account, and they would look through all the portfolio images and projects, and then they would come back and say, hey, we're working on a piece for closets. Can we use these 3 closet projects that you did? And then you can share the before and after. And so it was very little work on my end, because they would just comb through all the content that I was putting out and then reach out to me and say, we would love these in this publication. And we would work together to get the imagery over to them, and then we would do an interview, and then the magazine would come out a couple months later. Yeah. But I love that partnership because it is real stuff. It's not fake and staged and on a set. This is real life that people can relate to, and that's what I loved so much about working with them.
I love that. Now, something tying it into real life that I don't want us to breeze over is you're still raising 3 kids, but you're growing a business. So, talk about that kind of transition for you, and not even necessarily a transition, but just additional, requirements for you. And like you said, for 5 years it was you. There wasn't a delegation of this task and that task. It was, I'm doing it on my nights, my weekends, whenever it was. So talk a bit about, the balancing act of, mom raising family, but then also, building a business.
Right. So everything evolves, right? It just, looking back, things have happened the way they were supposed to happen, and things are now projecting forward the way they're supposed to happen. So now my kids are 20, 18, and 15. And so they're at different phases of their life, and my business needs to be in a different phase. And, for as many years, I love being hands-on and doing the work. But if I want to see this business grow and scale and help more people, I have to step back, and I can't be hands-on as much anymore. So in order for that to happen, I had to hire people. And then kind of also speaking to the personal side with my kids, I want to be able to work from anywhere. The goal for me is I still want to work, but I want to, if my son wants me to come down to Santa Barbara, which is where he goes to college, for a week, I can up and go, and I can still be working, but I don't have to be hands-on. Yeah. And I want that flexibility in my life at the age that I'm at, the age that my kids are at, and I really want to pour myself into my team and provide jobs. If
Yeah.
if you want to be a professional organizer, I have the business and I'm happy to bring you in and train you, and you can be a member of our team. And so, I want to provide jobs. I want to provide more help for families who need help. And I also want time with my kids
Yeah.
and grow the business. So that's kind of this is 2025. This is what's going on right now. And so right now I have 7 members on the team. My goal by the end of this year is probably adding another 3 or 4.
Amazing.
And so this year, so far, it's only been a month, it has been very challenging because I'm shifting from really being so hands-on to now having to put all this structure in place. Like, how are we calendaring our projects? How do I know when my team is available? I still have to meet with the clients and vet them and make sure that the project is the right project for us, make sure the game plans are set, make sure nothing's falling through the cracks. Train my team constantly. It's just constant training, mentoring, retraining, and marketing, trying to get more marketing because we're expanding around the Bay Area. So people know that we're in this one niche area, but now we've expanded into several other areas. And so kind of getting the word out that we're there. And so there's all these new hats that I'm wearing, but also delegating. Like we recently brought on an HR person finally. So now I don't have to do HR anymore.
Yeah.
Which was really not my expertise. I don't really want to do California compliance HR.
Yes.
But she is really good at doing that. So trying to find the right people to come in and do that sort of work, and building the culture, making sure that the culture of the business, the employees are happy, the clients are happy. It's a lot. It's been a lot, but I'm very excited about how it's looking, and I'm excited to see what it will look like at the end of December of this year. How much more we would have grown, and how much more I would have learned. How many more people we would have helped. So I feel like this is really such an exciting time.
Yeah.
15 years in, wow, now I'm really getting somewhere.
I love it. So let's give the folks a few practical things to walk away with if they find themselves in a spot of it's time, I need to begin organizing. You have these 5 P's: purge, place, pause, product, polish. Talk a little bit about that. I know we could spend a whole episode just talking through these things, I'm sure, but what are, kind of the practical first starting steps for someone that's, walking into, wanting to clean the house, clean the garage, get, spring cleaning coming up here? Right.
Well, yeah, I think the first step is taking a look holistically at what is going on. I think let's figure out what's going on. Let's write it down. Let's figure out what your biggest pain points are, and let's be very clear and realistic about what space you have available. What can we do with it? So, and always starting with decluttering. And I think if you write it down and you focus on something small, be realistic about the time investment that you can put into that space and how you can actually get it from start to completely finishing it before moving on to the next one. And that's, I think that's where we come in really helpful, because we do keep it very tight and we keep it very focused, and we're not letting you just drift into all these other areas of the house, because it's easy to kind of let things spiral, because you're like, oh, I know where this goes. I'm going to pick it up right now and I'm going to take it over there. And then you go over there and then you start messing around with stuff over there and you get off course from where you were. I think just taking a moment, writing everything down, writing down your goals, writing down the spaces that are really bugging you, and then just take one at a time and just start with decluttering. Don't even think about products. Don't think about wall storage. Don't think about bins. Just really be honest with yourself and give yourself the time to go through everything and declutter, because decluttering in and of itself really helps you feel better immediately. It helps lighten the space. It helps give you a couple wins. And, then from there, once you've decluttered, you'll know exactly how much you have, and then you can determine what direction you want to go with storage, whatever your storage solutions are for whatever space it was that you were working in. So I think just taking a moment and not rushing it, and being realistic about your time to tackle it, and also the available space that you have, I think is really important.
Absolutely. Now, parents with little kiddos, like you mentioned, hey, they're in this phase, but we've got a younger sibling, and hey, that younger sibling might need these clothes, or they might want these toys. What is kind of the recommendations there? How do you walk through that with people so they don't wake up in 2 years saying, "Dang it, I wish we wouldn't have tossed that thing away," but they're also not, fighting with each other about things that they're retaining somewhere in the basement that's just taking up space, or so they feel.
Right. Yeah. Well, a lot of times we will bin, everything we'll categorize by size and gender, but we'll bin it and we'll label it and we'll put it wherever they want to keep it. The garage, the very tip top of a closet is a good spot in the child's room, where we can use that top shelf in a closet where nobody's really reaching up for that into that space very often. So we're binning things and encouraging people to keep whatever it is they want to keep.
Yeah.
And then, when they do have that second baby or third and final baby or whatever it is, just letting it go, phasing it out as as they outgrow, that 6 to 9 month onesie collection, it's time to pass it on and just donate it.
Absolutely. Now, you've said this a couple of times, just you having the experience professionally has helped, but then I'm sure implementing it into your own life as helpful to say, well, here's how, when I was in that phase, here's how I did it. And I think so many times you've repeated that relatability feature. So talk a little bit about, how just your personal experiences allow you to relate to, your customers in such a deep level, because you've been there, you understand, one, the time, or two, the frustration that can go into, being at that spot.
Yes, I think just the fact that I am a parent and have experienced it, I'm not going to say it automatically makes you an expert, but you automatically have a heart for your client. You feel for what they're going through, and we have a couple of families right now that we're working with. One of them is expecting a baby any day. It's their second child. And they are roughly the same age difference from my boys. And so I was able to have a conversation with her about, the stuff, the volume, the things. And she really related to some of the stuff that I had to share. And then we have another client they're expecting their very first baby. They have never had a child. And she has zero idea how it's going to look. And I was able to kind of have a conversation with her about phases. And this thing, like investing in certain pieces that are going to sit on the nursery floor, like a changing table, or, what can that transition into later, and kind of helping them, steer them in the direction to make the right investment in the pieces they're bringing into the nursery, because I know what phases she'll go through after that. It definitely helps. I think I really think having, and again, that's our niche. You can be a professional organizer and niche into anything. Our niche just happens to be families. I think it would be a little challenging for someone who doesn't have children to come in and have it come as natural, because you really have to experience the pain that we feel in those early years, dealing with all the stuff and all the transitions and the phases, and it just helps you, the clients can really connect and relate with you, and they feel like you get it, what I'm, without me even saying it, I feel like you're picking up on what I'm laying down,
Yep.
Yeah, I think that does help a lot.
I love it. Well, Sam, I want to say thanks so much for joining and sharing your story and just all the amazing pivotal moments that have led to where you're at. Any last things you want to share?
I mean, I was thinking so much. If you asked me this question, I thought this morning, I think if you have a dream to do a job, and truly this job is something that is so natural to me. I think everybody has gifts that they are given. Going back to our conversation when I was younger and everything that I've gone through, life experiences, I think I recognize now why I'm doing what I'm doing. This is what I was meant to do. I have a gift for things that come very natural to me. Everybody does. So don't ignore your gifts that you have to give to people. You have them for a reason. And I think people often go into a career that they think, whether it's driven by money, but it's not really something they're passionate about. And then later they transition and say, I don't know why I did that, and now I got to pivot and do something else. It's okay to listen to that tap on your shoulder. You have a gift to give, and don't be afraid to just step into it, even if it's going to take hard work. Like I had to dig and do all the hard work to get. There isn't a degree. You can't go to school to become a professional organizer, right? You kind of have to just jump in 2 feet first and figure it out on your own, and eventually you'll get a community of other peers that are in people you can talk to. But I think I want to encourage people to do what they love and what is naturally gifted to them. I think I'm so happy that I decided to not go through with that MFT program, and I decided to do this because I'm so happy that now we've built this business and it's something I love, and I can't imagine doing anything else.
I love it. Well, there it is. Whatever it is that's been on your heart or on your mind to pursue, take some steps and start navigating it. And Sam, thanks again for sharing your journey, your knowledge, and excited to watch your journey. And we'll probably have to do this again in 2 or 3 years when the team's 20 people instead of 7.
That would be awesome. I would love that. Thank you for having me on too.